In today's weather, a long wave ridge dominated the central states, pushing much of the wintry weather up to the Canadian border. In Texas, a cutoff low was sneaking underneath that ridge, bringing wet weather to the state. And on the east and west coast, long wave troughs, and that's where a lot of our weather is this afternoon. Just for a moment, let us ignore the fronts and ignore the isobars and look at the thickness pattern. That's going to be this dashed red and blue pattern on the chart. So what are we seeing here? Well, we see these thickness lines do dip south across the west coast. Similar situation off of the east coast. See that right there? And in the central U.S., they do bulge northward, and that identifies ridging. Now, this is not completely correlated with the upper air charts, but this does kind of give us an idea what the long wave pattern is like. And if we check out the central plains, we even get some concentric appearances to that field. That's indicating very warm air across Kansas. At the time of this map, it was only 82 degrees. Looking at the very latest data, however, we are up to 86 at Lamar, Kansas, 85 at Goodland, and up there in eastern Nebraska, we've got mid-80s at this hour. We are expecting 90 degrees around Yankton and Sioux Falls. Conversely, on the west coast and east coast, we have thermal troughing. These thickness lines bend southward, as you see right here, and that identifies an area of much cooler weather. Similar situation out on the east coast, but you have to go quite a ways offshore to find that. Looking at the weather in the northeastern states, cool weather continues. Temperatures ranged from the 30s and 40s in New England to the 60s in the northeast corridor. In New York, a winter weather advisory is in effect tonight. Across the Adirondacks, the area north of Saratoga Springs into Vermont, we're expecting mixed precip with up to 1 to 4 inches of snow, ice accumulations up to 1/2 inch. In New Hampshire and Maine, we have a winter storm watch. This evening through Saturday, that may be upgraded. Heavy mixed precip with around 6 inches of snow and 1/4 inch ice accumulations. That extends all the way to Augusta and Lewiston. And of course, northern Michigan, we've got a mess up there. An ice storm warning this evening, Saturday and Sunday. All of the UP of Michigan, except for the far west, looking for up to 1/2 inch of ice and 1 inch of snow. There will be a lull early Saturday, then a second round will be coming in tomorrow night and Sunday. We have a winter storm warning on the Keweenaw Peninsula, a winter weather advisory further west into Iron Mountain, Ontonagon, and over to Ashland and Duluth, up to 3 inches of snow with ice mixed in, and also an ice storm warning for tomorrow night in the area around, I think that's going to be just north of Wausau into Rhinelander and up towards Iron Mountain. A different story in the southeastern states, lots of 70s and 80s as upper ridging dominates the region. The warm spot, southern Alabama, widespread sunshine, highs near 83, and Tampa, they were expecting 85 this afternoon. Red flag warnings continue in the Georgia and Carolinas area where we've had wildfires. Southwest winds will be gusting to 25 miles an hour with relative humidities down to 20%. In the south-central U.S., heavy rains in South Texas yesterday. We roll it back about 36 hours ago to yesterday morning. You can see all that activity there in the lower Rio Grande Valley. Some very heavy rains, 13.79 inches in 24 hours at Harlingen. That broke the record of 0.78 inches set in 1923. McAllen, 8.18 inches. Brownsville, 5.72. So, yeah, just some tremendous rains. Fortunately, it is tapering down. Most of our weather problems have shifted east into the Texas-Louisiana border area. We have a tornado watch in effect right now. We look at the radar out of Fort Polk, Louisiana. This isolated cell ahead of the line had a history of tornadic activity as it passed over Toledo Bend Reservoir. That was about 12:30 p.m. Back behind it, this cluster of multi-cell thunderstorms extending from just west of Shreveport all the way to Beaumont, Port Arthur. And there is the potential for tornadic storms the rest of the afternoon until 7 p.m. this evening. In the northern plains, yesterday we had some hot weather. It was up to 90 degrees at Dodge City. We had 90 at Russell, Kansas, 85 at Chadron, 83 at Alliance, 83 at St. Joseph, 73 at Cheyenne. Those were all records for the date. And of course today, as I mentioned, we're expecting 90s out here around the extreme southeastern South Dakota border area near Nebraska, looking for possibly up to 92 at Yankton. We have red flag warnings across northern and central Nebraska today up into the Sioux Falls area due to gusty west winds up to 35 miles an hour. And of course, as you go further north, we pick up those winter weather advisories in the northern tier counties of North Dakota, far northeastern Montana, and northern Minnesota for mixed precipitation and light ice accumulations. We were looking at warm conditions today across Colorado, 60s and 70s in the mountain valleys. Denver expecting 76 this afternoon, 86 at Pueblo. That area under a red flag warning from Trinidad to Walsenburg and Pueblo due to strong southwest winds gusting to 35 miles an hour. Same for the San Luis Valley. But out to the west, yeah, there's that telltale comma shape. We go to the water vapor imagery for a better look at that, and we see a shortwave disturbance transiting that part of the Intermountain region into the Central Rockies. This has taken a track to the northeast. It will be crossing Colorado tonight and moving into the Great Plains for tomorrow. We move down to California and look at the past 36 hours. You can see that wave crossing the Sierras. There is still some residual snow showers in the southern Sierras. Yosemite Park up to Lake Tahoe and Lassen Peak through 5 p.m. Winter weather advisory looking for 3 to 7 inches there with 10 inches on the peaks. And you can see on the Caltrans camera I-80 at Kingville, 6,100 feet elevation, they are getting some snow up there, not quite chain conditions, but the roads are certainly slippery. In the northwestern U.S., still unsettled conditions. Big vortex spinning off of Vancouver Island. Yesterday, we did set one record high that was way out in Montana at Bozeman. They reached 70 degrees, breaking the old daily record by 1 degree. And in Idaho, yesterday, strong southwest winds picked up dust from the Black Rock Desert, home of Burning Man, and lofted it into the Boise, Idaho region. For today, however, cool as persistent troughing remains off of the coast. We'll look at the visible imagery, and we see that it is showery. Let me constrain that to just today. And we see all that cold core convection flowing onshore, a little bit of orographic augmentation right there on the coastal ranges and the Cascades as well. 50s today in most areas, 30s and 40s in the mountains. Winter weather advisory in the mountains of southwestern Montana this evening, Saturday and Sunday, due to 5 to 9 inches of wet, heavy snow, mostly above 5,000 feet. Winter storm watch just issued for the Butte, Anaconda, and Deer Lodge areas for late Saturday and early Sunday. Some of those areas getting 4 to 12 inches. And that's the National Weather Summary. Did that run on too long? I don't know if that discussion is too dry. I usually try to keep it under 10 minutes. Let's take a look at the weather out there in the Pacific. Stormy, as usual, in the Gulf of Alaska. Alaska itself is cold. Temperatures hovering around zero with about 20 to 30 on the south coast. As we go into Canada, some very cold air slipping into the Northwest Territories and Nunavut. The core located right there around Johaven down to Arviat and Rakin Inlet. That's helping to feed this winter storm out in the prairies. Snowfall warnings were posted today from Edmonton to Saskatoon, the lake districts around Winnipeg as heavy snow slowly tapers off, totals running about 6 to 14 inches. That extends into western Ontario. Snowfall warnings, especially around Kenora, Dryden, Thunder Bay, with the possibility of freezing rain close to the Minnesota border. And as we go further east into the Great Lakes, a large area of snowfall warnings from Sault Ste. Marie to Chapleau to Sudbury, North Bay, over to Perth, basically in this area right here. And then further south from Parry Sound to Kingston, I think that's right in here, we could see over 1/2 inch of freezing rain accumulation. That will result in some power outages. And going into Sunday, we may see problems into southern Quebec. As freezing rain expands there, ice accumulations should run only about 1/4 to 1/2 inch. Some concern about severe weather as we go into the weekend. Starting out today, a slight risk. It's been upgraded near that tornado watch. Then for tomorrow, slight risk from western Missouri into northern Oklahoma. We could see a few strong hailstorms around Chanute and Bartlesville. Then for Sunday, there could be some big problems through this corridor from the Midwest all the way down in Arkansas, the Arklatex. All hazards are possible, including strong tornadoes. Here is the play-by-play with the latest NAM model. We see a frontal boundary from Falls City through Salina down to about Medicine Lodge and back westward towards Lamar. This implies a possible dry line right in here. So the triple point located around Medicine Lodge with, dry line potential. In fact, I can see a little bit of convergence of the wind field, but the model not breaking out anything, so that suggests that the air mass is capped. All of this suggests possibly a very late show, maybe even after dark. Finally, we get enough convergence to get widespread storms going. This is around 1 a.m., so I'm not really too sure what we're going to be looking at for tomorrow afternoon. We're going to have to look carefully at the existing data, the SCUTs, the visible satellite imagery, and of course the surface fields. Anyway, we go into early Sunday. There's the setup. Very likely a low-level jet is established through this area. In fact, why don't we just look at that? I mean, that's why we're here, right? So here's 1 a.m. on Sunday. Low-level jet from Dallas to western Missouri, about 50 knots right there. I don't have the 7 a.m. panel, but there's 1 p.m. So that's pretty much running from about Paris, Texas, up across the Ozarks into St. Louis. So picking that back up at 7 a.m., there's a wave along that frontal boundary. Canadian front coming south right there. Warm front, cold front, and so on. The main wave up there in Iowa. And that's pretty much the setup. So the low-level jet and moisture axis flowing through Arkansas into the Ozarks. So we get the addition of daytime heating. The frontal boundary continues advancing to the east. We have destabilization going on. We pull out the darker colors, capes up to 2,000 to 3,000 across a large area. Of course, the main question is how much development are we going to get out there ahead of the fronts? I mean, certainly we could see some development along the actual cold front itself, but typically on a tornado outbreak day, there's going to be convection out ahead of the strong surface boundaries. So a lot of that's going to come down to the thermodynamic field that we have for Sunday. The model, however, breaking out some convection out there in eastern Arkansas, and these could be some isolated cells right there, and there's some other cells out in western Arkansas into Paris and Texarkana. So after dark, this is probably going to be a quasi-linear convective system. More discrete elements further to the north. This should fill in as well. And possibly by 1 a.m., it's just going to be kind of a large squall line, a lot of forced convection. And I would think that probably the severe weather potential should diminish overnight. And we compare that with the GFS model. Of course, the precipitation is not going to be quite as obvious, but early Sunday, we can make out the frontal boundary right in here. By afternoon, frontal boundary right through here, we see convection out ahead of the line in eastern Arkansas, maybe around Shreveport, Monroe, and up into the area just west of Paducah, Mount Vernon, and up towards Mattoon. So this could be the area of severe weather we're concerned about. Looks like the NAM may be going a little bit further west than this. We'll just have to see when we get up to Saturday and early Sunday. As of now, does not really look like much from what I can see in Mississippi from these models. I haven't really looked at all of them, but so far it looks like maybe a nighttime show there. The model is nevertheless going for some strong convection after dark, maybe the northern half of the state there, so of course this will bear watching. And certainly the last thing that we need is nighttime tornadoes. Those are especially hazardous. Hopefully we're not looking at anything like that. I would expect after 6 to 9Z, we should see the severe potential start to diminish a little bit. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at that weather forecast. Obviously, a lot of weather up there in the Great Lakes. The liquid freeze-in precipitation line from the UP of Michigan to Lake Huron, Toronto, the Adirondacks, into southern Vermont. Then we go into Saturday. Not really a whole lot of change. The main wave moves on off to the east, and we get that reprieve that we talked about in Michigan. But here comes wave number 2, working up that boundary. And you notice it follows the tight packing of that thickness field. That's a baroclinic zone, and where you have that gradient really tight and close together, that favors self-development of these waves. For tomorrow, Maine and New Hampshire will be in the ice box. Temperatures close to freezing all day, 38 degrees at Boston, but you go out here on this side of the boundary, New York City, 81 degrees, Poughkeepsie, 76, quite a contrast. Freezing rain in between with snow further north. In Texas, the heat gears up, widespread 90s from the Rio Grande to Abilene, Childress, Wichita Falls, 80s up to Pratt, and of course we're going to have to keep close tabs on that dry line. I don't really have that analyzed on here, but it's going to be right in that area. We could see, in fact, the GFS does try to break out some cells around Altus. See that convergence of the wind field. That's probably just enough to get some cells going, but they may be a little bit on the high-based side, being so far west of the moisture field. Of course, the main severe weather area, that slight risk in this part of the warm sector. Cold air filters through the Dakotas into Nebraska. Highs here will be in the 30s, 40s, and 50s. Then we go into Sunday. Let me see if I can keep this moving along. Of course, that is our severe weather day. Anywhere from the Arklatex into Arkansas, the eastern Ozarks, out to the Mississippi River region, western Tennessee, and Mississippi. It will continue to be cold across the north-central U.S. There's that winter weather system in the Great Lakes. We could see numerous power outages as some areas contend with additional rounds of freezing rain. Denver struggling up to 50 degrees. That's going to be their coldest day of this week. On the west coast, another Pacific weather system starts moving inland, and as that makes its way into the interior, those snow levels will drop down to about 3,000 to 4,000 feet in the Pacific Northwest. In the eastern U.S., it becomes a very active Monday. Could see severe weather anywhere from New York, Pennsylvania, down into the Carolinas, Georgia, and Florida. This other system on the Pacific coast moves into the Rockies. We'll see a lot of widespread snow and rain through there. And that gradually moves out into the northern plains, and snow once again from Minnesota into North Dakota and wrapping around through Montana and Wyoming. Then for Wednesday, we could see a severe weather risk pop up once again as this warm sector noses up into the Ozarks and Arkansas. That means the possibility of severe weather across this entire region. We'll just have to see when we get up to Wednesday, of course. Frontal system moving through the Great Lakes. Rain snow line once again around Minneapolis, Green Bay, and Saginaw. And we'll take it forward through the rest of the week. Continued active in the southern plains into the Ozarks. And we get to the very end April 5th, April 6th, and April 7th. Yeah, another strong Pacific weather system. More rain for Washington and Oregon. And that's all for this edition of Forecast Lab. This is probably a good time for me to ask you to mention in the comments where you're located at. Would be kind of cool to see the distribution of where all of our viewers are. And do we have any viewers outside of the U.S.? I know we have a few in Canada. And if you're in any far-flung areas of the U.S., like Wyoming or northern Nevada, mention that. Would be curious to know that as well. And if you want to post your weather reports and let us know how much rain you got or any other significant weather, please feel free to post. We're all interested. All right, hope you have a great weekend. Take care, and we will see you again on Monday for the special Private Supporter Edition and on Wednesday for everybody else. Take care, and we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.